It's Thursday, gang, and I'm still Ron Phillips. Welcome, everyone. I am the producer of the Daily MoJo. Beth and Brad are still vacationing, and for the first 3 days of this week, we replayed our shows from the International UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico, and we were there for the International UFO Festival. But now we have some extras for you. On this episode of the Daily MoJo, we're going to give you some of our pre-recorded interviews. On tap first, we'll visit with Dr. Joseph Buchman. His lifelong interest in cosmology, nucleogenesis, and the possibility of extraterrestrial life led him to serve with 6 other members of the United States Congress on the 2013 citizen hearing on disclosure in Washington, D.C., first as the moderator and then as a member of the congressional panel. After that, we're finally getting to both parts of our interview with Don Schmitt. You've all seen part 1, but today we offer you both parts. Not only is he an advisor to the executive director of the UFO Museum, he was an on-set technical consultant for the TV series Roswell. He's also the author of Witness to Roswell, which was the #1 selling UFO book in the world for 2 straight years. And finally, we give you an extended interview with civil engineer Dennis Balthaser. During the past 30 years, he has researched the 1947 Roswell incident primarily, and also done extensive research about underground bases, Area 51, and the pyramids of Giza. Now, these interviews were recorded during our visit because some of the guests just weren't available during our live show. These are pretty interesting, and we definitely enjoyed talking with them. We hope you enjoy them also. So without further ado, here's today's show.
Live from Roswell, New Mexico, the UFO capital of the world.
The Daily MoJo.
All right. So I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It is Buchman.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking time, number one. You have an interesting and storied history. You've run for the United States House 3 different occasions. The ideas, the concepts, your platform was, and I love it, freeing all witnesses and whistleblowers from any illegal NDAs regarding waste, fraud, criminal activities, and evidence of human interaction with non-human intelligence.
Bingo. Yep. That's a formula that would cure the world.
Why? Okay, I'm going to ask you flat out, because I talked to Don Schmitt yesterday about whether or not he thinks that there will ever be full disclosure. What's your, right out of the gate, and we'll go from there.
I think anybody who is looking at this issue and sentient has full disclosure. I mean, we don't need the government to tell us what's going on.
True.
You look at the evidence and you reach your own conclusions. And it's not that complicated. I think there's more galaxies out there now than there are grains of sand on planet Earth. But there's certainly more stars. And now with Hubble and James Webb and this new telescope down in Chile,
yes.
Oh my gosh, the average star's got at least 5, maybe 8 planets around it. Some of those planets have moons. All those environments are possible of causing biological life to arise. Mm-hmm. Then you got Stephen Dick, the historian for the United States Navy, who as long ago as the 1970s was theorizing that we live in a post-biological cosmos. So when you think about the billions of year head start, all these trillions of galaxies have with their countless billions of stars in each galaxy.
Okay.
That evolved life likely does what we do, which eventually it creates a more durable, sentient, longer-lived artificial intelligence. And that could be what's trolling the universe. It's at subliminal speeds and still able to get everywhere easily. So we don't know. But the idea that we're the only sentient life in the cosmos, that the creator of the entire multiverse, because there's whatever outside of we can't even see and observe,
right,
would only have life on this one little grain of sand around this one little star is an absurd thought. So if you want disclosure, wake up. You got it.
And the fact that we, as of late especially, it seems, I keep reading articles about new things that we found that break all of the laws of physics, that break Newton's law, that break the laws of gravity, that break everything we thought we knew, that we had hard locked in, and that was a law in the known universe. Not so much.
Not so much. There's nothing that breaks the laws of physics. There's a lot of stuff that's breaking our misunderstanding of physics that we have mischaracterized as a law.
Right.
And we're so pompous that we think we've discovered truth and we call it a law of physics, and then we say, well, things violate our law. They're laughing at us for even thinking that way. There's nothing that violates the laws of physics. We just don't understand them.
Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. You're familiar? All right.
What line do you want me to quote?
Okay. The only human arrogance would assume that a message sent from the basically outer space
Spock.
would be for humans.
Humanity.
There are
Absolutely.
far many other species on Earth than just human, and it turned out to be for the whales. But we do have a tendency to be very arrogant in our own existence. But again, if there are, and I believe that there are many other life forms out there, the Fermi paradox. Why haven't we found them? Why haven't they found us?
They may not want to be found. That's the easiest answer. So here on Earth, we have a creature that starts out as a caterpillar, goes into a chrysalis state, emerges as a butterfly. Mm-hmm. I think humanity's in that chrysalis state right now. We're about to reach some sort of a tipping point where our knowledge base increases exponentially because of artificial intelligence and whatnot. And when you see that start to happening on a planet somewhere, they get nuclear bombs, they get rockets, maybe you start observing. Maybe you've already been observing for a long time, but you certainly intensify your observational work because you have concerns that, when our kind of friendship traveling off this planet with bombs and, 10,000 of them pointed at you and me right now. They're all pointed down. That's insanity, right? So if a human being looks at a caterpillar in its chrysalis state struggling to emerge as a butterfly, what do you do to help?
You're supposed to do nothing.
You leave it alone.
Yeah.
You leave it alone. If you help the emerging butterfly out of that web-like state, and it's struggling, it's sweating, it's barely hanging on to life, but it's got to struggle to emerge as the butterfly, and if you help it, you destroy its musculature, and it will never fly and die. And so as I imagine a benign to benevolent extraterrestrial intelligence looking at us, I think that's a pretty close model to what's happening. They may be full of love and concern, but any attempt to help is going to destroy our ability to merge in our full ascendant state.
Or they're waiting for us to reach peak flavor.
So that's possible. To Serve Man is probably the best Twilight episode ever.
It is possible. That's the scary thing. The other thing that I was just going by another Star Trek reference from Enterprise. The first time they send the Enterprise out, the first time Starfleet sends out, no weapons on board.
Yeah.
Then I found that fascinating. Then they go out and whoa, there's some a-holes out here. We're going to need guns.
I got to go back and rewatch Enterprise. I missed a lot of those episodes.
Enterprise was good.
It was good up until the last couple of episodes of the last season.
Yeah, the last one was on the holodeck. That was stupid. Jonathan Frakes coming back as Riker. Come on, give me a break.
And it was like they ran out of time. The same thing with Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Ran out of time. All right, here.
Yeah.
Go record it. Move on.
But Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds Season 3 is coming out in a couple of days. First episode, I think, or maybe it came out today.
That one you're tough. You
don't like Captain Pike?
I love
Captain Pike.
I don't, however, like the fact that in the opening scene of the first episode, he's riding through the hills
on a horse in the snow. Yeah.
But there's windmills. Their nod to the... And I'm thinking, wait a minute. By then, you didn't even notice them, did you? Was I triggered? No. It was
I thought it was a museum. I thought he was riding through a place that was a museum of outdoor equipment from thousands of years ago.
Okay, maybe that's it. But I just thought that surely by then we'd have thought of some other way than to put these 800-foot tall beasts
Ray
in the backyard.
Kurzweil was predicting that solar power would obsolescence every other form of energy, and we're going to be able to print solar panels off a printer at home. Sometime in the next 10 years, the cost of per watt coming off a solar panel is dropping like a rock.
And it's
kind of
possible.
exciting.
I would love to have a form of energy like that. I tell Ron all the time. That's your name, right?
Yes, it
Ron.
is. Thank you.
I tell him all the time.
Are you part of the show?
Dear friend, I never forget. It's
not all the time, apparently, but
I wish I lived in the Star Trek universe.
Well, every time I open this damn thing that I can't figure out how to use, I have a PhD in telecom. I'm looking at a thing they call a phone.
Right.
The worst app on this thing they call a phone
is the phone.
Is the phone. It's great for accessing the Library of Congress and cat videos. Right. But when I try to answer a call from my son, I can't do it in time. I call him back, and he's like, "Dad, you're an idiot." I know.
There's some great cat videos, too.
They didn't have that much trouble with these on the Enterprise, so maybe
that's a good point. By the way,
this is the thing.
Your Costco card, you can now put that digitally on your phone. just so you know.
Yeah, all right. I'm sorry, I'm old now. I give up.
That's
I
his
surrender.
excuse too.
I was
Back
really
to
into
aliens.
that. But I would love to live in the Star Trek universe if it wasn't for the a-holes who screw it up all the time and would take advantage of
that
our
would be
good nature.
Kirk screwed up a lot of things. That original series, my goodness.
You think? So wait, you're not going to tell me that you're a Picard guy.
Oh, no.
Oh, good.
What am
'Cause
I?
he's a
I think I'm a
Picard guy.
Captain Pike guy. I really like Strange New Worlds, except for the windmills. Right. And there's all these versions of Pike. There's the Kelvin universe Pike, and there's the original Pike, the Cage. The Cage was the best thing ever produced.
Yeah, it
so
was.
far ahead of its time. The networks turned it down because and proving that they were idiots, and then they repurpose it as the Menagerie. Just absolutely brilliant stuff.
You know there are lyrics to the Star Trek theme
There
song?
are, yeah. And Roddenberry got the royalties for those. We know. Are we doing Trek trivia or are we at the UFO conference?
You know what? It all like this.
No,
It all meshes in.
Roddenberry really kind of was one of those a-holes to some of the people around him, too.
Capitalism is brutal.
You know, it is.
A friend of mine said that to me, and I realized,
I'm not sure that fraud and cheating people out of money is fairly characterized as capitalism. To me,
Is that
capitalism
fraud?
is the kid. Yeah, it was pretty fraudulent what he did. Might have been legal, but it wasn't fair. In a competitive world, I would have gone for the other version of Roddenberry that didn't do that to his friends. That would be capitalism.
He got a piece of it. He didn't take. I mean,
But the lyrics are so stupid.
have you heard?
They're out on the internet somewhere, and Google is our friend. But yeah, you can't remember them because they're just too stupid. Something about he's searching for his love is all I remember.
Well, he had a lot of that.
Yeah, he did.
He got love just about everywhere he went. I wonder if that means that Kirk was a piece of him.
Could be.
He's out
He's
there.
like the Genghis Khan of the universe. You know, something like 20% of Europe is descended from one guy
It does seem that way.
and his grandsons. Who
All right, so the non.
you want to start over with this show?
I'm having a good time. now.
Wandered around.
It's what we do.
In watching all of the hearings in Washington, and I've been investigating quote unquote UFOs for 30 years. Started doing it at the Nashville Network. Saw something in the sky in Alabama. Talked to Leonard Stringfield all those years ago.
Oh, I would love to talk to Stringfield.
He was an interesting.
His
cat.
files are still buried away somewhere.
That's what Don was
Got to
saying.
dig him out.
And that Stanton Friedman
It is a
had
holy
piece
grail.
in there, and there's
It's a mess.
it's a shame that there are some. It doesn't matter what part of any business you go into. There's always people button heads, but we're all looking for the same thing. We all want to know what the truth is. We all want to know. And you're right. Why do we need the government to stamp it with it's authentic?
It's not going to change my world one iota.
And that's just it. That's what we always say.
I finally got around to that.
And I knew it. But watching these hearings on Capitol Hill, seeing them talk about non-human biologics, which technically that could describe a banana. Do you think that is that intentional? In other words, is people like David Grush, are they whistleblowers, or is that just propaganda being put out there to mind numb the masses and give us something to think about?
I don't know who you think you're talking to, but how would I know? It certainly is data that suggests there's a path here worth investigating. And I'd go back to Edgar Mitchell, sixth man to walk on the moon, PhD from MIT. Grew up here in Roswell. His dad was a Roswell rancher. He goes around after he gets back from the moon, ticker tape parades, eventually comes to Roswell. People pull him aside and said, they told me they'd kill me, they'd kill my whole family if I ever talked about this, but I knew your dad and you're a good old boy from Roswell, and what landed here weren't no weather balloon. So Ed Mitchell, again, PhD, Dr. Mitchell from MIT, went to the moon with Alan Shepard on Apollo 14. Would you want to get on the next boat out of town when the 113 before you just about took everybody out, barely got them back alive? Was in some ways the greatest success of the whole Apollo program was getting 13 back,
right,
with three alive human beings inside. So that's a hero. I'm not getting on Apollo 14. I can't imagine.
Exactly.
But he makes it home, and after being in Roswell, he goes knocking around the Pentagon saying, "Hey, the people I trust in my hometown, they're telling me this." And you can find a YouTube video of Dr. Edgar Mitchell saying, "I've been privileged enough to have been briefed on the fact that we have attempted to reverse engineer non-human created technology." Well, okay, either one of the 12 guys who walked on the moon has gone completely batshit crazy, or he's part of an intentional disinformation campaign, or he's telling the truth. Now, I met Ed Mitchell here, and I met Ed Mitchell in Washington, D.C., and I had long conversations with him, and at the end of one of those, he said, Joe, is there anything else I can do for you? And I said, yeah, would you give me a hug? And he gave me so I've hugged one of the 12 guys.
Very nice.
Who walked on the moon, and he's not a liar, and he's not part of a disinformation campaign with every bit of my discernment of what's real.
Right.
All right, so now I have what's real is Ed Mitchell has been told by people we've attempted to reverse engineer. Are they lying to him? Maybe, but why would you lie to the sixth man to walk on the moon? I don't find that credible. The most credible thing I find is that we have attempted for over 70 years in a legacy program, extra constitutionally funded, by definition illegal and unconstitutional, treasonous even, attempted to reverse engineer non-human created tech. And then you got other people who are saying the same thing. So I tend to give them a high level of credulity. I can't say definitively that I know or don't know.
That's where I am these days.
Yeah.
I used to think I could say that I knew X, Y, Z, or didn't. Now I don't know anything. I'm old enough to know I don't know anything, and unless I'm standing in front of an event when it happens, that I can't guarantee it did happen.
But you can bring that not knowing to disclosure and just look at some basic stuff about the size and age of the universe. And, you know, what the people at SETI are telling us, even though they're like, oh, it's too far away, they couldn't possibly get here. They're either siloed or they're lying. I'm not sure about that. But I've also met Seth Shostak. I've actually been invited to present at NASA Ames at their Contact Cultures of the Imagination conference that they used to have, where they brought in legit academics to imagine first contact. And I felt respected and heard there. And I think that makes me unique among people in the ufologist community that have actually been invited to speak to NASA. And so if you just listen to Seth and those guys about the size and age and a likely number of stars, and you look at the biological evolution here and just imagine over that amount of time to conclude that it didn't happen anywhere else is insanity. Right? Well, okay, then it happened. But did they build technology that allows them to travel to here? And would they want to travel here? Would they be watching what's going on? Well, I don't know. But I do believe, Ed Mitchell, that we've attempted to reverse engineer non-human created tech that crashed here or landed here. So, yeah, they're doing that. And I wouldn't you?
Yeah,
out of curiosity.
absolutely.
You get enough tech, you're going to get bored. Playing around with DNA might be a fun thing to do. Never get boring. Traveling around all these little grains of sand around these countless trillions of stars, that would be fun.
Well, and here on Earth, when they say the skeptics will say, well, if they found bodies, if they found tech, you'd know about it. That's too hard a secret to keep. It's the easiest secret to keep, because even if you said, no, we have bodies, no one would believe it.
Here's the thing. Imagine disclosure happens. The president comes out and says Roswell was real. And Well, did they keep the secret? We will then at that point say, no, look, they couldn't keep the secret. Look, there's 5,000 books have been published on this. They didn't keep the secret. The only way there's an illusion of them keeping the secret today is they've covered it up with a ton of disinformation. And attracted to this pile of disinformation are hucksters, people selling $5,000 trips out in the desert to meet E.T., and I think we all know I'm referring to the good Dr. Greer.
Those aren't
That's who I was talking about on the way here.
And I get flack. Well, if you criticize Dr. Greer, you're part of the black world. I'm not part of the black world. I just know that Dr. Greer lied to me under oath because I gave him the oath at the 2013 Citizens Hearing on Disclosure, and he gave testimony that is factually not true and demonstrably so. He testified to an Admiral Ryan, who is an advisor to President Sarkozy. And won the Ampere Prize as a medical doctor. There's no such person who exists. And then when I asked Dr. Greer to revise and extend his remarks, which we do in congressional hearings, he ghosts me and then starts accusing me of being a disinformation person or his supporters around him or whatever. But no, what you do not need to pay $7,000 to go out for 4 days and sit in a desert and try to have a contact experience. You can just go do it, right? Apparently, some people are fairly successful at it. And if you believe some of the current testimony about psionics, some of those people are in the legacy programs. And there's some consciousness connection. to the appearance of craft, and that's exciting stuff. And to his credit, Dr. Greer was kind of onto that fairly early. But no, at any rate, around this pile of disinformation, there's hucksters trying to suck money out of the gullible.
Sadly.
And then there's also people who maybe are in need of psychiatric intervention. So when you cover up the truth with all that, intentional disinformation from the government, people who are not fully connected to reality and wanting to believe things without evidence, people who are out pulling money out of people who are gullible and selling some I've got the secret door to truth bullshit.
Yep.
Then you cover up the secret pretty well. But it's not like it's really covered up. There are people out there saying the truthful things now. We just don't see it. After disclosure, we'll come back and say, no, they couldn't keep it a secret.
Well, and there's so many places. You brought up the amount of information that we have to sift through now, and it's enormous to the point where I was reading that the newest way to store information, though at least they're investigating, is to store it on DNA or in DNA.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool?
And that's what the little capsule of DNA, and you can store petabytes and whatever is bigger than that. And it's, I mean, there's just so much information out there now.
And then can we read human DNA? Is there a message hidden away in there somewhere?
Right. And we keep finding, that's the other thing, that with the numbers and all of that, and code. I mean, hell, I'm not convinced we don't live in a simulation at this point.
I wouldn't be surprised if we do. I can imagine that the true nature of me, whatever that me was before I was born on Earth, put a quarter into some sort of VR machine, and the other part of the price was you have to forget your real nature to truly enjoy the VR experience. Richard Bach wrote in a book called Illusions, a similar thing. Go read Illusions. It's one of my favorite books.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull, right?
That's the Jonathan Livingston Seagull guy. Yeah, he actually flew to my home once, and we had a campfire in the backyard with a bunch of people from CompuServe. But that's another story.
CompuServe.
In CompuServe, the Illusions and Beyond forum. Anyway, read Illusions, and in that book, there's an ascended master who's a pilot, and he's just flying around, and he runs into Richard Bach. Richard writes himself into his own book. It's metafiction. And he says, meets this guy out flying biplanes around, and the guy says, I was a master, but I gave it up. He said, like, how do you learn to be a master? And they give you a book to read, so it's the Messiah's Handbook. So anyway, Richard interacts with this guy. Go read the book because I'm doing a terrible job of summarizing. But the important point is, eventually they go into a theater to watch Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right?
Right.
And they're watching the thing, and just at the climax near the end of the movie, the guy leans over and says, okay, Richard, let's leave. And Richard's like, no, I'm watching the movie. No, let's leave. No, I'm watching the movie. No, I want to see what the weather's like outside. Right? The real reality's outside. Yeah. No, I'm not leaving. I'm watching my movie. Well, there's us, except for we're not watching the movie on a screen. We're the projector, we're the screen, we're the actors, we're in that environment. And if I die, or when I die, I won't be surprised to wake up and go, that was a really stupid game. I got to try something else. That whole Earth thing, that whole physical space-time reality thing, I got to try something else. Maybe that's where we are.
I'm going to spend the rest of the day
thinking about that. Yeah, me too.
But it doesn't mean this isn't important. I think what we do here matters out there, especially in terms of being honest with other people. And I have some reasons for thinking that relate to the UFO issue. I've encountered a couple of individuals who I think know or knew. One of them has passed away, so I can talk about him a little more freely. His name was Chuck, and he was a Vietnam War hero. He was second in command at Fort Bliss, and he became the chief briefing officer for the Joint Chiefs. He would not talk about UFOs. He talked about a lot of other stuff that I thought was classified, and he said wasn't, like the idea that after the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was a joke because the Soviets parked submarines under 6 inches of water with the same capability they had on land. We just chose not to fight about it. That was one of the things he told me. Somebody check that and see.
Wow.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Wow.
And other stuff like, but he would not talk about UFOs. Please don't ask me about UFOs. Yeah. And then another friend of mine at NASA who is alive and well. And so I'll not talk about him as explicitly, but both of them said something like, look, to get the kind of job I have, you have to sign certain little pieces of paper that eliminate the Bill of Rights. And as much as I might like to share with my own wife about some things that I'd really like to share about, if I did so, they would find out I would go to a place worse than Leavenworth. My wife would lose the health care and pension benefits. Please, Joe, don't ask me about UFOs again. So why didn't they just lie and say, oh, that's a bunch of hooey? I think those guys know this is some sort of virtual experience, or that there's some really good reason never to tell a lie. Or at least they didn't want to tell a lie to me, because I would have believed them, both of them, if they'd said, you know, that whole They didn't say that. They said, don't ask me about it again. And they take it as a very serious issue.
That's a fascinating standpoint. That is, man, that'll mess with your mind, won't it?
And it will. It'll mess with your mind for a while now. And we'll talk about it all week next week. Well,
you think
I don't sleep anymore.
It's
I
crazy.
can imagine. You think we went to the moon the first time they said we went to the moon?
Oh, absolutely.
The first time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Apollo 11's landing platform, the descent stage is still there. The ascent stage came up.
Go
Neil
ahead,
and Buzz
Brad.
made it
Go ahead.
happen.
Ask him the same question you asked me. Have you seen it with your own eyes? He does this to me every show.
Well, I have a good friend who was on the island of Hawaii that saw the translunar injection burn from Hawaii. I believe him. I also believe, you know, we've got satellites up there that can see the footprints and the descent. Yeah,
I think we were
absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
I think we've been there. I'm just not convinced it was the first time.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick and all that stuff.
I don't know. I don't know how or what or. The why is to make sure that we appear
Beat
to
the
be
Russians, period.
beating the Russians.
Yeah.
But I don't know the rest of it. Yeah. Either that or NASA at the time, and maybe still, were the biggest bunch of incompetent boobs recording over their own original tapes, forgetting the way we got there, throwing away the tech that we used. I mean, there's so many. You threw away the plans.
I believe all that happened. I believe they recorded over the 2-inch tape. I used to be a 2-inch videotape operator for a TV station. That stuff was expensive.
Yeah.
I didn't think they think it was valuable, whatever. And it's stupid, but
Big
not
green
incomprehensible.
boxes.
I did go to McMoon's at NASA Ames where they had the 2-inch tapes of the original satellites that surveyed the moon looking for the Apollo landing sites. And that stuff was done on film, black and white, and then slow scanned and sent back by analog to Earth and recorded on 2-inch tape. And they recovered a couple of machines from a NASA employee's garage. They'd thrown them away, and he saved them. And then they took a McDonald's at NASA Ames, got those machines working again. You know what the lubricant is? Whale oil. Whale oil was necessary. So I go in there and they're like, I'm like, I used to work on this stuff. Where'd you find the whale oil? It was an awesome experience, and I'm just hitting the highlights of it. But yeah, I absolutely believe we actually built rather primitive tech that got Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon and back. Barely. I mean, it's
Through the
stupid.
Kuiper Belt and all of that.
Yeah. I actually 100%. The second astronaut I met who walked on the moon was Buzz Aldrin, and if you Google me, you can find the video that the Sundance Film Festival did of me telling my story about meeting Buzz Aldrin, and then I had conversations with him for the premiere of In the Shadow of the Moon, a documentary about the guys who went to the moon. Go watch that.
Okay.
Stop watching all that conspiracy stuff. UFO Museum in Roswell. I'm saying, stop with the conspiracy stuff. No, Buzz went. If you tell him he didn't, he'll punch you in the face.
I know. Yeah. He gets
and
real
90
pissed
years
about
old
it.
still. Yeah.
He gets really pissed off about that.
Didn't he
stuff.
actually punch somebody in the
He
face?
did.
Yes.
He did.
That guy was
that
on
was
his
holding the
ass.
Bible too at
Yeah,
the
it
time.
was. Sure
Punched
was.
it. Put your hand on this Bible, but bang!
Yeah.
No, I ain't doing that.
He was mad.
Buzz is on Facebook. You can go friend Buzz Aldrin, and he'll give you a message a couple of times a week.
Oh, wow.
It's awesome.
I'm doing that right now.
There you go. This has been a pleasure. It really
It has been a pleasure.
Thank
Did we
you.
ever talk about the aliens?
Yeah, we stuck them in there a couple of times.
How do you know we're not aliens? That's a beauty. Where can people find out more about you?
Okay, so I'm going to give you my pencil. I'm giving these out here. This is going to be a highly collectible thing. My wife doesn't believe that, but I printed them up anyway. So I got to thinking about I'd like to talk to an alien. And which alien? Well, not the scary ones.
Absolutely
So
not the
anything
scary
that's
one.
benign to benevolent on that end of the scale. And I thought, where would I start a conversation with a benign to benevolent alien? Well, it's a lot like trying to talk to an angel or God. So
Right.
where would you talk to an alien? Where would you start the conversation? And I think about humanity a lot like I think about our 4 children who pulled all the pots and pans out of the kitchen cabinets.
Right.
I walk in and I can be angry because it's a mess, and they're never going to be able to make it right. There's no way they know where that stuff belongs. So what I want to hear from my kid is, hey, Dad, I'm sorry. Can you help us make this right? So thinking through that, I then went out in 2007 and bought the domain name www.thepeopleofearthapologize.com.
Very nice.
It's graphically terrible. I need to find a 14-year-old who can redesign the site. I give up. I did it in Dreamweaver. Now it's WordPress. I'm lost. Again,
you and Heaven's Gate. I
yeah,
mean, they're both right
so
up there.
in 2007, 8, 9, I was putting up apologies. People were writing. Then I let it go dormant. And by Roswell next year, I'm going to have that site up and running. Because I happen to think it's the most important website in the history of humanity, maybe the most important thing in the history of humanity. If ETs are here, their artificial intelligence is downloading our internet and everything else, every broadcast, this right now, every second of the day. They're running it through some sort of artificial intelligence, and I wanted to have an alternative to all the porn and cat videos.
I think you've done it.
Yeah.
I think it's marvelous.
Peopleversapologize.com. Check it out. I think you can find my email there.
Cool.
If not, I'm drbuchman@gmail.com.
You didn't say your last name right.
Yeah. Drbuchman. Buchman. In Swiss German, it's Buchma. And they got two N's. They don't say either one. Buchma.
You know how they are.
I only know this because I went to Switzerland, but that's another story.
I do love Switzerland. I've been there once.
Nice. It's
Skied
lovely.
the Schildhorn.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, sir. It has been a pleasure. And you're here all weekend, right?
I'm here all weekend, and go find somebody and apologize to them for something. Surely you have something to apologize for.
He definitely
It's a good way to win the video game. Win this video game, go around apologizing to people. The little ding, 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 ding on the virtual reality machine out there is ringing. I can hear it.
I love it. Cool. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
sir.
guys.
The Daily Mojo.
Live from Roswell, New Mexico.
If you're not familiar with Don Schmitt's work, he is an amazing individual. How many books have you written?
I just finished my 19th.
Wow.
And this one is The People versus Roswell, where each chapter I've focused on the violations of human rights and due process and even First Amendment associated with Roswell and the aftermath. And then I have lawyers, 3, 4 lawyers commenting at the end of each chapter of they cite specific chapter and verse of where laws have been violated. I even have a retired judge doing my foreword. And so we're going to hit them in the courtroom with this book.
Good.
In other words, the skeptics, sorry, you don't break the law. You don't, as far as, for example, threaten the media, and in the case of the newspapers and the radio stations here in Roswell, with the loss of their licenses over a damn weather balloon.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that. Funny thing is, I remember exactly on my walk when I was listening to that part and how I was that pissed me off too. The things, again, that the government did to the citizens of this area.
Precisely.
It's
criminal.
Yes.
It's criminal.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely criminal. And you opened my eyes to that. It was through Keith Malinak that you and I met. And we did part 1. He wanted me to remind you of part 2, which is what, August? You're going to be back at the mic with Keith in August. Are you not? Or is
I know we had scheduled part 2, and so I certainly hope so.
Okay.
And you'll send me.
He will.
He will. Yeah, you'll get it.
I'm the same way. If she hasn't written it down, I don't know what I'm doing.
In fact, August is my birthday month as well as my anniversary month, so it helps me not forget. Husbands have a way of doing that.
Yep.
Birthday's not anniversary. No, I'm kidding. But so I'm generally home through August. This month I've been gone most of the month, and then September I will take off again with work, and so August is perfect.
Well, good. Well, I know Keith is listening right now too, so he'll remind you.
I had a great time with Keith. So I was.
I love doing his show with him, and I was on the way down here. I sent Keith a text. I was like, "Hey, can you reach out to Don?" Because, like I said, he gave me your email, and I'd emailed you. I hadn't heard back. He said, "I don't have his email. I don't have his phone. I've only got his email." We're down here at the front desk yesterday. I was like, "Hey, if Don Schmitt is, he's in the next room." I'm like, "Oh, well,
that was this morning."
My mother bless her heart, she's going to be 98.
Wow.
This fall. Even her short-term memory. I mean, I could call her right now and tell her, Mom, I'm going to call you tomorrow. And she'd sit there and wait for it. She wouldn't, it wouldn't be like, oh, you'll call me sometime. No, she'll. So it's amazing. My dad he was just a few months shy of 90 when he passed. And even the last day of his life, the way he was talking, and he kept saying, play me my favorite song. And because I sing in a professional choral group.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
cool.
I had them then sing at his funeral, and it was specifically the song Think on Me. And it's a beautiful song about, in other words, when you're lonely, when you feel, just think on me. I'm gone, but still, just think on me. Think of me fondly, think of me lovingly, and that type of thing. And the way he was laying there, and he was in home hospice. Mm-hmm. But, play me my song. Play me my song.
And he's almost 90?
Yeah, he was almost 90.
He was almost 90.
My dad, too. Yeah. My dad, was that 10? Has it been 10 years? Phew.
Yeah.
It's
so we
weird.
got good genes. So
that's what I base myself off of. Is my dad was 90, my mom was 94, but my brother died when he was 68.
Whoa!
I know, and I'm like, damn it! I hope I didn't get that part of the gene pool.
And it's like some of our Roswell witnesses that we would learn that they would lose their children.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden,
that's a good point.
Yeah, we had a son, we had a daughter, both gone. And it's like, yeah, but you're in your 90s. Yeah, but they were barely 70. It's like,
is it modern life? I wonder if this is modern lifestyle. What those people who were involved in the Roswell incident back in the 40s, what did they do for a living? What were those? Because I've gone around Roswell, and it's like, what did these people do for a living? What did they do for a living back then around here? Do you know?
Much of it was, centered around just the ranching.
Okay.
Like the local Ford dealership, his name was, Farnsworth. Mm-hmm. And yet he still had a ranch north of town. Mm. And they would be into, horse breeding.
Okay.
And then certainly the cattle, sheep. But they would work, local business. There was a theater here. This was originally, as far as a theater, a movie theater.
Okay.
And there were auto dealerships. There were furniture.
So hardworking middle class.
Yeah, hardworking middle class.
American just out there doing their thing day to day.
They already were, those who were more affluent were into, as far as the oil derricks. They had the oil, businesses that they were becoming involved with. And so, but not that you mentioned that, I'm glad you did, there was a wonderful rapport between the locals and the military. Mm-hmm. You had 7,000 men and women stationed, and I say women, it was just a handful because they were some of the nurses at the base hospital. You didn't have a unit of wax as far as with the women at that time. But there was a high degree of contact and association with the town. And they would emphasize the point that up until the incident, that it was like a divorce. Yeah. That it was like a curtain was torn in half, and just like that, no one trusted one another anymore, and there was a lot of whispering, and it's like everyone had top secret information that they couldn't openly discuss any longer, and so it ruined that.
Yeah,
and
big time.
I don't think that's something that we've even addressed at length with anyone, but the point being that psychologically, that you would have a wonderful association, military as well as civilian. And what would it take to just totally rip that apart? Mm-hmm. And again, a weather balloon would not do that, ladies and gentlemen.
We were talking about that earlier.
The fact that these were, and I go back to the simple, hardworking people, not to oversimplify them, but they had no reason. There were not one of them was out there trying to be a grandstander, trying to get the spotlight turned on them. There was nobody looking to be a Kardashian in 15 minutes of fame.
No evidence of that whatsoever. No.
Mac Brazel, it was more of a pain in the butt for him to have to deal with the crap that was dumped on the ranch that he was working. It's like, now what do I do? It'd take me forever to clean this up.
He was the foreman out there. People confuse the situation that he was just a rancher. No, he was the foreman. He was in charge of that ranch. And as a result, no good rancher, hired hand, and specifically supervisor, foreman, would allow any such garbage, just be out there for days, because cattle and sheep are like goats. They devour everything in their path. And the thought that the government to this day would have us believe that wreckage was out there for weeks before Brazel finally got word, well, they're offering a $3,000 reward for any physical evidence of a flying saucer. It was 1,000 from 2 newspapers and another 1,000 from a private individual. So 3,000 total. And that he finally, well, I'm going in the Roswell anyway, so I might as well gather up, this weather balloon with this radar reflector kite and come in the Roswell and see if I can collect on that $3,000 reward, which back then was a full year's, salary, income.
Sure.
And the point is, again, you don't know the people here. You don't know the history of the people here. And the first time that Kevin Randall and I were out at the ranch house, at that
was your writing partner. That was your business partner.
Originally.
Yep.
And there was a water tank that was just spilling over with sheets of foil and rubber, and it was clear that these were weather balloons.
Right.
And the only thing that they would ever turn in for the reward was maybe the instrument box. And there would be a tag on it, $5, and call this number. Well, good luck, because they didn't have phone service out there until 1986.
Good grief.
So you're living in total isolation, no electricity, no phone service, no television, no radio, nothing. And then this happens, and you're all upset that you have to circle the sheep 2 miles around this debris field, 2 miles, to get to their water trough to water. And who's going to clean all this up? Because it's more than just a weather balloon that you could just gather up, toss into the back of your pickup truck, and that would be the end of it.
Throw it away.
And that water tank in present day was precisely what they would do with weather balloons.
Right.
They would just toss them and then, just toss them in there, because they didn't want to bury them either, and you couldn't burn them.
Right.
And so they knew what weather balloons were.
Yeah, that's just it. Marcel, who...
he was the head of intelligence with the 509th Bomb Group, so he's the lead intelligence officer, being in charge of the atomic bomb. So he's number one in the entire U.S. military at that time. Number one.
That's I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's incredible too. So he knew what a weather balloon would look like. He dealt with them all the time, because didn't they launch them from right next door?
Right here at the Roswell Army Airfield, in conjunction with their daily bomb drop exercises. Now, granted, they weren't using actual bomb casings. They were using sand barrels of equivalent weight and size. And if you were to go north, west, east, you'd stumble out in the middle of the desert, these asphalt runways. So they had these emergency runways paved out there if the B-29s had to make an emergency landing.
Right.
So they're still out there, covered now in sand and dirt, but nonetheless, that's what they were doing. And they would launch these balloons twice a day from atop the bank building, 6 stories, just
downtown
north of here on Main Street, in conjunction with those training exercises. So nobody knew those balloons better than Roswell.
Right.
And the fact that Marcel would be ordered, the patsy, the fog guy, not here in Roswell, which is also another question. Why don't they have the press conference here? Well, they needed to shift all the attention away from Roswell. And it's going up the chain of command, and it's General Roger Ramey, who happens to be the boss of the base commander here in Roswell,
Right.
Butch Blanchard, Colonel William Blanchard, and they get away with it. Blanchard announces he's going on leave after the press release goes out that they've captured a flying saucer.
Yep.
Marcel is put on a B-29 bomber called Dave's Dream, and they send him over to Fort Worth for the press conference.
Yep.
And he places a box of the actual wreckage that they had up in the flight cabin. He wasn't aware that they loaded a weather balloon from Roswell into the bomb bay, which is what they then switched when General Ramey takes him out of the office to a map room.
Yep.
And while he's out of the room, they switch the actual material for the weather balloon.
He got snookered.
Yeah,
He
big
was
time.
made the
Big
fool.
time. Big time.
They did not care. They didn't care what they did
No.
to him either. That is...
No, but did they not force him to go along with the
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
explanation?
It was just a matter of ordering
Yeah.
him. I mean, he's
Yeah.
a lowly major,
Yeah.
and Ramey's a one-star, and it was just a case of, this is what you're going to do, and now you're going to pose for these pictures.
Yeah.
And there's a hallway of reporters waiting to see the just-arrived piece of the flying saucer, and then Ramey only allows one reporter into the room. So much for a press conference.
Right.
And that was someone they had worked with before, someone they trusted, and that was James B. Johnson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram newspaper. And Marcel is ordered to pose for 2 pictures. And the point is here, too, gentlemen, it's not till after they've just explained it all away, nothing to see here, it's just a weather balloon, then first Marcel is sworn to secrecy. After the fact, he's ordered by General Ramey not to repeat a word of this to the reporters in the hallway, and then not even to utter a word of this to his wife back here in Roswell. And then they still detain him in Fort Worth for another day and a half. He doesn't come back till the next evening. We even know the crew and the pilot and the name of that flight that he returned on. That was called the Straight Flush.
Right.
And it was with the 393rd Bomb Squadron. We even have a copy of the manifest and lists Marcel on the flight. And so all of it was a setup, and they got away with it. And here's the worst of it, gentlemen. Where is the rancher during all this time? He's a civilian.
Right.
The military has absolutely zero authority over him. They abduct him. And they keep him out at the base for the next 5 days, where they get him to change his story before he is then escorted to the newspapers, to the radio stations, where he retracts, where he recants, and takes it all back. Just a weather balloon. I don't know why everybody got all excited over just a mere weather balloon. But while he's being held out at the base, he's subjected to a full Army physical. He's deprived of food, water. They keep him up all hours of the night.
Torture.
And he's subjected to a full body cavity search. Now, does anyone want to convince me that they were looking for a piece of a weather balloon?
And that just what, and it endures to today. And most people, I think, do not know all of these details, which is why getting your book and reading or listening to it is essential, because it is so relevant in today's climate as well. We don't trust the government. We don't trust these entities. There's a reason we don't. They continue to lie, and it's been going on for decades. You're not giving up, obviously, on getting the story out there.
No.
You're going to continue.
We're planning another archaeological dig, and next time with subterranean drone radar that we can canvas even a 5-mile radius.
Right.
We're still tracking down families, knowing their fathers, their grandfathers gone, but the hope that maybe they said something yet before they died. We're up to over 30 deathbed confessions, all admissible in a court of law.
Amazing.
And so we fully intend to expand that number. And we're working with Congressman Burchett and Luna and Grothman with the hope that stop asking for silly documents.
Yeah.
Let's start demanding to see the physical evidence. Right. I want to see the pieces, and I want to see the bodies.
Live from Roswell, New Mexico, the UFO capital of the world.
The Daily Mojo.
All right, we are back with part two. At least we're calling it part two of our conversation with Don Schmitt, who is the author of Witness to Roswell, an incredible book, and a bunch of other books as well. That's the latest one, and it's the fourth edition. Is that right? Third.
But it was the 75th anniversary edition.
Right.
And even there we added 4 new chapters and a bunch of additional witnesses. When the book first came out, it was the #1 selling UFO book in the world.
Is that the one we have, the third?
2.5 years.
Okay.
2.5
yes.
years.
Yeah.
And it was optioned for the next motion picture.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then COVID hit, and that's when...
Boy, that screwed up a bunch of stuff.
Oh, a lot of things. We were doing the series Roswell First Witness with History Channel, and we needed to have like 10 hours in the can.
Right.
And we only had 6. And the way we had to scramble to work around COVID just to finish that series.
Yeah.
But it killed us for a second season because it wasn't anything that we had originally planned on.
Don't get me started on the day and the year the Earth stood still will never stop. That goes back to the mistrust of the government started back in 47.
If I may just say,
all right,
I'm an administrator back in my village back in Wisconsin, and so we also work with the county board and we work with the county executive, and where the rest of the country, everyone shut down, we did not shut down.
Good.
Our county executive immediately put out a statement, we are open for business.
Good.
And our schools, nothing shut down, and we never saw a single negative as far as response to any of this.
Right.
And whereas Milwaukee public school systems were shut down for 2 full years, those kids now have been penalized 2 years for the rest of their lives.
Yes, sir.
And ours are right up the schedule.
That's
and
good.
So who was right? Who was right? We were.
Y'all were.
We were.
Let's travel back in time.
Yes.
How many? I keep forgetting how many years it's been. 80, right? 80 years ago, the crash in Roswell.
It's 78.
78 years, because in 27 it'll be 80. All right.
Yep.
The bodies, because here at the International UFO Museum, when you walk in the back, one of the fabulous displays, 2 of them actually, show the little bodies. There was in 1994, the alien autopsy video. That was the year that it was released. That's the year that it came out, right? Is that the year that
we had I was there at the premiere in England, in London, when they released that, and the proponents of the so-called alien autopsy were already sending us stills because they wanted our endorsement. They wanted us to be able to say, this is precisely what our Roswell witnesses observed. And we were quite frank in saying, no, this being or this cadaver bears absolutely no similarity to what our Roswell witnesses were describing. So the first thing that we then demanded that they would in no way associate this with Roswell.
Okay.
And they tried. They were originally billing it as the Roswell autopsy. And at least they did comply. They did stop doing that. And then it just became the alien autopsy. And we also pointed out a lot of the flaws and a lot of the mistakes and things that were classic as far as Hollywood special effects, like when you're performing as far as a surgical incision, and that when you work with latex, you have your hand in the foreground so you don't actually see the ripple in the foam latex.
Right. Yeah, that makes
sense. And
the
decon, the breathing, as far as outfits, back then there would have been tubes and all types of oxygen tanks that they would have been working on. Whereas in this film, they are self-contained. They weren't self-contained back then.
So it is a complete hoax. It's
and then
bogus.
where the magician that would step forward and claim that he was the one who actually created this latex dummy.
Right.
And it's like, why would we then challenge him? Because he was able to demonstrate how he did it and why he did it.
Right.
And so, again, it's no different than a Roswell witness confessing to a hoax.
Right.
Why
right.
would we continue to promote, somebody who nobody else would believe?
And was that just for publicity? They were trying to make a buck? How would they made a buck on that?
They made a lot of
just
money.
selling the VHS?
Fox TV alone, the amount that was circulating around that, even with Nippon in Japan, we're talking into the millions. And I heard at one point up to 6 million.
Wow.
So all under, the billing that this was the actual alien autopsy, and originally from Roswell.
Right, right.
And
I know they even wrote it into an episode of the X-Files.
Yes.
Was...
Now, whereas our autopsy scene here at the museum, that cadaver, that body, is from our Roswell movie.
Okay.
That's one of the props that now from 30 years ago.
That was on Showtime.
Yes.
I had forgotten Dwight Yoakam.
Yes.
Played Mac
who's
Brazel in
a
that.
close friend. Dwight and I have stayed in contact all these years. In fact, my wife has met him now twice. I've met his new bride. And last time I was with Dwight, and I said, we've optioned another one of the books, and so we'd like to do another movie on Roswell. And the way he looked at me, and he smiles, and he goes, well, so we're going to have another crash?
Oh, Dwight. And who? Kyle MacLachlan was in
Kyle
that.
MacLachlan and Martin Sheen,
Martin Sheen,
Peter McNichol, and Kim Grice, and Charles Martin Smith, and Bob Gooten, and Xander Berkeley, and wonderful cast, top to bottom. And then we had a playwright, the late Arthur Coppett, who did our screenplay. Just imagine that we even had a playwright.
Right.
And then Jeremy Kagan, who was award-winning director. And it was just a grand experience for being consultants on the picture, and then both the exterior in Bisbee, Arizona, and then North LA, as far as all the interior filming. And then we had Kevin Randall and I both had cameos in the movie.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say where.
All right, I'll find you.
All I'll say is I did a scene with Kyle MacLachlan, Xander Berkeley, Kim Grice, and Martin Sheen.
All right, I will find it.
Nice.
The prop that is back there in the museum from the movie, that is based off of witness.
No.
Talk to me about that.
No. We insisted, and they had no problem. They understood. But just as to this day, I will tell people there is not an accurate representation, portrayal of the bodies or even the craft from Roswell depicted in any way here in the museum. And for this simple reason, right now we are making plans and we have designs on the table. And one of the things I would like to do is a full-scale diorama of the crash site.
Oh, wow.
The ship, the bodies, actually even using the ground and the sand from the actual site as part of the display.
Right.
And the reason we haven't done that to date is with the concern that we would influence, coach, as far as contaminate any possible witnesses. So in other words, if someone ever came in here and would describe that prop from the movie, we know they are not genuine.
Yeah.
So you have access to the descriptions.
Totally.
And those have never been released?
No.
Really?
Though we do describe them in our books. And we've had a number of composite sketches. But again, we've been very careful. It was one of the mistakes, I feel, that the late Bud Hopkins and then Dr. John Mack, and even David Jacobs, that in releasing all of your control information.
Right.
You're contaminating the field.
Right. It's like police work where they don't
They'll
release
claim that we've had 100 phone calls and we have all these leads, and often they will even put out misinformation with the intention that it then disqualifies a lot of the nonsense, a lot of the noise.
Right.
We've had to do the same thing. It's basically you're investigating the properties of a crime minus the crime. It's the same process.
So, are they close? I mean, that body back there?
Size-wise, yes.
Okay.
The larger eyes, yes. A larger disproportionate heads, yes. But there are specific details. Like, you notice that they always depict aliens as naked. They're always naked.
Yes, they do.
And I'll be honest with you, for all of the occupant case, and specifically Roswell, they wore clothes. They had garments. Roswell, it was a one-piece silver gray jumpsuit.
Okay.
From the neck, there was a collar, and then as far as wristlets, and then anklets, and then there were feet covering. They were like little boots. Their hands were exposed, so their hands and their heads, but fully clothed.
But
and
their
yet
feet,
they're always naked.
Yeah, it always seems that way. And the feet here in the center display, I've never looked at the feet before. I mean, those don't have shoes on, I don't think.
We've tried to.
Tried to put shoes on those?
Well, and if you would look at those bodies as far as in that saucer display, they were originally completely without sans clothes.
Oh, really?
And I was the one that I put a collar and wrist and ankle, and then I spray painted silver. So to make it look like a skin-tight jumpsuit.
Yeah. Right.
And then we tried the fashion like a foam, but they got so big it made it look like they were wearing big clown shoes.
Ronald McDonald aliens.
Again, I don't know where this comes from, but...
Well, it's like the game of telephone. It just changes every time somebody tells a story down the line.
Right.
But so the people who actually did see something in at the base where they had
at the crash site,
right,
in the back of ambulance trucks, at the hangar P3, the B-29 hangar,
right,
and then at the base hospital.
And there were 3 or 4 total bodies.
There were 4. There were 2 bodies at a separate site, 2.5 miles southeast of the debris field.
Okay.
And then at the impact site, just 35 miles north of Roswell, where it was the egg-shaped capsule, the pod, 2 more bodies, and a survivor. And you know what initially...
So that's 5.
5 total.
5 total.
5
okay.
total.
5 total.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what initially made us more and more suspicious of something much closer to town was when we were hearing that the sheriff and a number of his deputies had gone out and they witnessed not only bodies but also a survivor. And then the story of Dan Dwyer, who was a crew chief with the fire department, and it tied because there's the same phone line that went to the firehouse also went into the courthouse. So a call came to the fire or to the sheriff, each would receive the same call.
Right.
And that the fire department, a number of them went out with their private vehicles and also witnessed the bodies and a survivor. Well, the debris field is in another county, Lincoln County. This is Chavez County. They would have had absolutely no jurisdiction. They would have had no authority, no business, and they would have not crossed that line.
Right.
They would have not gone into another. And yet, it kept suggesting something much closer. And then when we found witnesses describing the impact just north of town, and it's within their jurisdiction. So again, it came together.
I'm in my mind. I can't remember the guy's name. He's going to the hospital. He sees the body in the back of the ambulance, I think, and he walks into the hallway, and a nurse comes out, tells him you can't be here.
That was the mortician, Glenn Dennis.
Who just got the star down here just yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or it would have been today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what the star was? I never did see the
he
name.
was the
Okay.
next one. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so he walks in. They'd already called him to see. Do you have kids?
What chemicals? What would you use for the preservation of bodies and tissue which had been exposed to the elements for a long period of time? And then the next calls were about child-sized caskets.
Right.
And then we even spoke to the son of the contract truck driver, because the son rode with him because they only had a couple on hand. So they drove up to Amarillo, which would have been where they would have picked up coffins of all sizes, and that they picked up 2 additional child-size caskets. And when they returned back to Roswell, he described how the whole town had been cordoned off, that they couldn't get back into the city, and that they had to circle around and come in from the west side of town. And that his father would drop him off and then went to the base, went out to the base, and that when he returned, he said that they weren't children.
And so he got to see them.
No, he didn't.
He
didn't. But that's what all the buzz was, that because the question, why would there be children involved in any form of mishap involved, with the military?
Right.
And so people were just hearing about the little people and the little men at the crash site north of town. And so the whole town was basically a buzz.
Yeah.
With the flying saucer.
Sure.
And there were bodies. There's talk of bodies.
So the people, how many that we're aware of, how many people actually saw the bodies?
From officers to the personnel at the base hospital to guards who were at the very hangar, P3, where everything transited through, to photographers and guards out at the crash site, and then the ranchers, the children, who were also involved, and Mac Brazel, the rancher himself, who would discover in the company of his son Vernon, his neighbor son Timothy Proctor. There was a ranch hand's son, Sidney Jack Wright, who we also interviewed. And then there was a young girl by the name of, her last name Eddington, who married, and then we just didn't have the correct name, and the Eddington, bunch of the Eddingtons had passed away, so we failed in that effort. But so then you also had the rancher Mac Brazel talking about the stench, the smell, the horrible smell, and then the comment when he was abducted, kidnapped by the military, and then when he was at KGFL, the radio station, and he's being interviewed on the air, and he's recanting, he's retracting, just a balloon, but then out in the lobby, and then Frank Joyce, the radio reporter, and Joyce sees the MP standing outside the glass door, and then he realizes what's going on, and then Brazel would make the comment that they said it would go awful hard on me if I didn't do exactly what they said, and then he's exiting, and then Joyce says to him, "What about the little green men?" And that's when Brazel turns back and goes, "But they weren't green."
Right. They weren't green. And Frank Joyce is the man who ended up, if I'm not mistaken, being committed.
Yes, for a full year.
For a full year.
At a mental hospital.
Well, this is the reason I said mental hospitals, as much as we need them, again, they can be used.
They're a place to be hiding people.
They're a place that has been abused, and it's you can abuse anything with the incorrect people in power, but it's hard to believe a guy like him got essentially held in prison. And what were
forever smeared, discredited. Oh, he was in a mental hospital. He's got mental issues. So, and Joyce would describe to us that not once did he experience any treatment. He would be told, "You're just going to be here for a year. Just enjoy your vacation. Wait it out." He would talk about playing cards and playing checkers in the hallway with some of the attendants. And whereas Mac Brazel, in his detainment, and what it took to crack him aside from being, deprived water and food and sleep. Mm-hmm. And his son would always tell him, would always tell us that I don't know what it would cause Dad to break. Even threats to him and to the family. Shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Because, he was as tough and hard. He was a cowboy. He was a rancher. And they don't take threats lightly.
Sure.
And then we spoke to one of the ranch suppliers. His name was Patterson. Mm-hmm. And he said that Mac had finally confided to him years ago what finally, got him to cooperate was when they threatened not only to put him, but also his entire family into an asylum the rest of his life. And they were more afraid of mental than being imprisoned, being confined, because mental hospitals, asylums back then, they did lobotomies. You were treated like an animal.
It was a true weapon.
Yeah, a true weapon. And that the military would have used that on a civilian. And he knew they meant business.
Where were Mac Brazel being, as I like to call him, if you're familiar with Yellowstone, the series,
yeah, absolutely.
He was Rip.
Yeah.
He was Rip from Yellowstone.
Who took no BS from anybody.
Exactly.
You mess with me, you got a war on your hands. Yeah.
And so the owners of the ranch at that time, when all this was going on, they weren't local, correct?
No.
They lived some other state. Did they never get involved beyond what happened?
Yes.
What happened?
Yeah.
Where
you're talking about the Foster family.
Okay, yeah.
And they were the owners of the property. And one of the things, and as I had mentioned before, that there was no phone service out there. There was only a phone at the general store. Her last name was Perkins. She's the one who ran the store at that time. And she even confirmed that Mac came into town all excited about all that wreckage and that crash, and that he needed to call his boss, which he would do. And so then when we tracked down the surviving Foster family, they, knew all about it, and they tried to come out to the very ranch, their property, and that they were turned away by the military. Just like Brazel's son, Paul, who also worked at a ranch in western Texas. And Paul was more concerned about the horses. Now, they've learned that their father is gone. There are no hired hands on the ranch at that time.
So it was just Mac doing the whole thing.
Mac is incommunicado. He's not talking with his wife down in Tularosa, where they had their home. And Paul is concerned that the cattle and the sheep out in the open grazing pasture will fend for themselves. The horses, they're penned up. Mm-hmm. They can't water, they can't feed, so he was just trying to get onto the ranch, which would be the main ranch house, which is 10 miles away from the debris field.
Okay.
And 2 days in a row, he tries to take care of the horses. And the ranch house has been commandeered by the military. They've set up a base of operation at his father's ranch house.
That's what you do when you have to get
pieces booted off the ranch.
That's what you do when you have to get pieces of a weather balloon.
Yeah. Yes, precisely.
You commandeer
the ranch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you take over. It was like Bud Payne. He would go on to become a judge. Judge Bud Payne. It actually even sounds good. Judge Bud Payne.
Does, yeah.
Sounds like a TV show. And he was retrieving from another ranch a stray heifer that had crossed onto the Foster ranch. And no sooner than he crossed over onto the property, an Army Jeep comes roaring up to him, physically accosts him, throws him over the fence and says, "Don't you dare come back over the next few days." And so, over a balloon, over a weather balloon.
It
boggles the mind.
It truly does. And all right, back to the bodies, I guess the provenance, the lineage. Once the bodies left here, where do we think they went? Where did they go?
Okay, there were two specific body flights. One was in a C-54 transport plane. It was O.W. Pappy Henderson. He was with the Green Hornets.
Okay.
And he would even confess to his wife. I'm forgetting her name at the moment. But
that's all right. You're allowed.
Yeah.
You've got a better memory than I could ever dream of having.
But they lived in Hawaii in the last years of their lives. And Pappy would confess to having flown a couple of the bodies with some of the wreckage directly to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Directly from Roswell.
Directly from Roswell.
Okay.
And then the second body flight was with the 393rd Bomb Squadron.
Carswell. Was that Carswell?
And they flew the Carswell Army Airfield,
yep.
Fort Worth. Mm-hmm. And that was the crate that was hidden in bomb pit number 1. We tracked down almost all of the surviving crew members on that flight, and it was the bombardier, First Lieutenant Felix Martucci, who, when they arrived at Fort Worth, and the officer is waiting on the tarmac, and there was a coroner, a mortician, that he had gone to school with, who was there with the officers, waiting for this crate. Now, why is a coroner, why is a mortician waiting for this crate that also was flown over under heavy guard, and that the crate was hidden in bomb pit number 1, which normally would have been reserved for one of the A-bombs.
And again, this is one of the great things about your book, Witness to Roswell, is the fact that you don't let a thread dangle. You follow every thread. You find the evidence. You find the receipts.
Because I'll give you a quick example, Brad. We question why the 393rd in that second body flight, why they didn't use their own aircraft, their own B-29,
right,
which was the necessary evil. And they flew over, it was called the straight flush. And then when we learned that the weather spotter plane for the Enola Gay was the necessary evil, and that the problem was that it still had all the weather equipment in the bomb bay, so they couldn't fit the crate into the bomb bay. So they had to substitute the other aircraft. So again, what are the chances?
Right.
And that's and again, it's not related to Roswell. It's related to Hiroshima and the atomic bomb and Paul Tibbets, and yet it becomes part of that story.
So the bodies go there. Do we know what happened to first of all, is the one that was alive?
What's the survivor?
What happened to the survivor?
Yes.
Where'd he go?
It also went to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, and we had witnesses such as Lieutenant Colonel Marion Magruder, who was a triple ace World War II. He was a member of the War College class of 47-48. And they were assigned to Wright Pat in April of 1948, where they were shown the survivor. Then we found all the assignment documents that, yes, they were assigned to Wright Pat in April. It doesn't say that they were shown the body or the survivors from Roswell, but they were indeed assigned at Wright Pat in April of 48. And it was Magruder's information that the survivor only lived a short time thereafter, and that he would describe to his 4 sons independently, when he confirmed to them that they had been shown the body, that he felt sorry, he felt pity for the survivor, that they were treating it like a caged animal.
And each one of his sons
have independently described that exact.
They say how long it did live? A week?
Just a short time.
Okay.
The description was a short time thereafter.
All right, and then so now we've got 5 dead bodies. Where do they all go? Surely somebody thought we should put one of these in a box.
You preserve unique specimens. And in recent years, we have had 3 full-bird colonels. One was Colonel George Weinbrenner, who was head of foreign technology at Wright-Patterson. He would become J. Allen Hynek's boss post-Blue Book at Wright-Pat when Hynek, and we have all the documents, we have the job descriptions. Would you believe we have skeptics that argue? Now just imagine, this is post-Blue Book. The Air Force is officially out of the UFO picture, but they're not.
No.
And Hynek's job description with Foreign Technology Division under Colonel George Weinbrenner is consultant on controversial aerial phenomenon. And they argue that, well, that's not UFOs. That has nothing to do with UFOs. So, Colonel Weinbrenner, okay? And then we have Colonel Thomas Mountdragon, who was a first-hand who would be stationed at the site I'm going to mention in a moment. And he was shown a cadaver in 1959 at this facility. And again, he was told it was from Roswell. And then we also have Colonel Robert Friend, who was the second-last director of Project Blue Book. And I knew Colonel Friend very well. And we were having dinner together one evening in Los Angeles. And I just said to him, I went, Bob, and he would say he was a skeptic. He didn't, again, Blue Book. And hypothetically, if you had bodies, where would they be today? And he just immediately, Dugway. Dugway is called Dugway, Utah. Yeah. Dugway is also referred to as Area 52.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And Dugway, more interestingly enough, is the Biological Medical Research Facility for the Pentagon. So that's where they preserve everything and anything. So Weinbrenner would make the comment before he died, we got 5 bodies in Utah. Friend, Dugway, that's where they would be. And then Colonel Mountdragon, that's where he was assigned in 59 when he was shown one of the bodies.
So you believe they're all there in like glass cases?
Or at least some of them, or at least. And then we had another full bird at Wright-Pat who said, we had a hell of a time keeping things secret, given that we are in the middle of a city, Dayton, and that everything was cleared out in the early 80s. Everything was shipped out in the early 80s.
But it's so easy. I can't remember who we were talking to this about, but keeping a secret. You let it out there in the wide open and no one believes it anyway.
Exactly. And that's like I always cite the example of the one novel with the vampire, the Dracula character.
Interview with a Vampire?
It may be, but it's where it's a journalist, a reporter who's on his trail, and the vampire says, "Go ahead, tell the world, tell them you have no proof," and that's been the dilemma with us, with our Roswell witnesses. It's just like that final confrontation with Martin Sheen and Kyle MacLachlan playing Jesse Marcel in that abandoned hangar. And in our Roswell movie.
Right.
And he's telling him it's all true and that, we have this recovered craft and we have these bodies and one of them was alive and everything. And then finally Marcel says, what did I see out in that desert back in 1947? And Sheen reels him, they just did a deep throat, reels him right back in and goes, Jesse, that was just a weather balloon. No, it wasn't. I held it in my hands. Go ahead, Jesse. Tell the world you have no proof. Yeah.
Will we ever?
If I have anything to say about it, yes, because I am still committed. We will still, conduct more archaeological work out there. We still suspect certain people of having pieces in their possession. And I'm not giving up on them, not for a second. In fact, I'm going to meet with one of them again in another month, and I'm going to actually appeal to them that my partners are getting older, and one of them is suffering now from cancer, and that please, if there's anything you can do for them. You know, we're not talking about going public, just they need to know that it was not all for naught, that they can die peacefully, happily, that mission accomplished, mission accomplished.
What is the next big thing you're working on? What is the next? I know you said that you might be a movie out there. What's the next?
Well, Bryce Zabel with Stellar Productions. I mean, they have my Cover Up at Roswell book option for the next movie. I know Don Most from Happy Days, who's also producer. Don's been a dear friend for 25 years, and he's part of that situation. The next book, The People versus Roswell, and then Our Day in Court, and then all this legal commentary as to how the government broke all these laws. The next archaeological dig with the subterranean drone radar. That really, we want to cover miles of territory with the chance that as the prevailing winds and rain may have shifted, evidence into other areas, and so we want to cover that. And then certainly still tracking down families whose fathers, mothers, grandparents were involved, and with the hope that they provided deathbeds before they left us. And so far, we have over 30 deathbeds, and unanimously, they are all saying there were bodies recovered, and there was one that was alive.
Amazing story, continues to amaze. Witness to Roswell. The 75th anniversary edition is available now. And Donna, you're amazing. You're an amazing guy, and I wish I had your energy. For a man of 39, your energy level is incredible.
Oh my God! Add another 30 years of that.
I feel every moment. But unless we miss something, I think that wraps it up, doesn't it?
Wraps it up.
Yeah.
The Daily Mojo.
Live from Roswell, New Mexico.
All right, Dennis Balthaser is with us here in the UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico. Dennis has, how many years you've been investigating UFOs and pyramids and stuff?
About 31.
31. So you've been doing it for quite a while. What got you interested? What bit you?
In the 70s and 80s, I'd lay in the backyard, look out in the night sky, and wonder what's out there. Then I started hearing about Roswell, books. Bought a book, bought another book, one of the 350 books.
Wow.
And the more I read, the more I realized this was more than a weather balloon.
Right.
So when I decided to kind of hang it up, because I'm back again.
Right.
I gave the museum library all those books. So they're in the library over here.
Okay.
I can't tell you where, but they're in
the
library.
That is an incredible library, too.
Now, well, let me ask you something. That's the second largest UFO library in the world.
Is it really? I had no idea. Where's the first?
Where do you think?
Is it Congress? No. I have no idea where.
You ready?
Yeah.
The Vatican.
That absolutely makes sense.
It does make sense.
You don't get in that one, but they do have the largest UFO library.
Why do you think that is? Why? What is it?
Well, because they have 4 telescopes. The Vatican has 4 telescopes scattered around the Earth. They have a lot of interest in space. Mm-hmm. People may not know that or think it, but they do have a lot of interest.
There's a lot of stuff under the Vatican we don't know about.
Yeah, Nazis, a lot of the Nazi stuff. Yeah,
and the largest art collection in the world, from what I've read. That's a. How much digging have you done around what the Vatican does and doesn't know?
Not a lot, because I just knew about the library.
Right.
And that's basically all I knew. And what you're talking about, I've heard of that also.
It is. It's crazy when you start going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
If Roswell was the thread that you picked it led you to a bunch of others, and that's what this tends to do.
I've been down that rabbit hole so much I may not get out.
Well, and you know, once you get down in there's so many ways to poke around. You don't really necessarily need to.
Yeah.
But what do you think happened here in Roswell in 1947?
I don't think it was Russian, German, Japanese, or ours. That leaves the question, whose was it and where were they from? I do think the atomic bombs had something to do with them being here.
Okay.
New Mexico in the 1940s was pretty hot. Los Alamos National Lab up north.
Right.
Down at the base, down at White Sands, they were testing V-2 rockets they got from the Germans.
Right.
The first atomic bomb was tested 2 hours from here, the Trinity site in White Sands.
Yep.
7 miles down the street here was the only atomic bomb group in the world.
At the base.
Yeah, the 509th Bomb Wing.
Right.
Are you aware that the B-2 bomber that bombed Iran last week is part of the 509th?
I don't think I did.
I did not know that.
No.
They're still in business. They dropped 2 bombs in Japan,
Right.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
After that, they came to Roswell. So they were here when the UFO event happened.
Right.
And pretty much took charge of everything. They left here, they went to England. Today they're in Missouri. That is the same 509th bomb wing that was here.
I had no idea. And do you think they found, well, they found something. You don't think it was a weather balloon?
No, the rancher had recovered weather balloons.
Right.
He knew what they were.
Yeah.
Right.
He would take a piece of it or pieces of it down to the base. They'd give him a reward, a couple bucks.
Right.
He could use the extra money.
Sure.
But this stuff, he had no idea what it was. He came to town. He didn't go to the military. He went to Sheriff Wilcox. Sheriff's office is located up the street behind the courthouse. Torn down a few years ago to make room for courtrooms. Mm-hmm. Then they got the military involved, and the rest is history.
I don't think I knew that about him being able to take pieces of a weather balloon. So if you found pieces of a weather balloon or any of the equipment, you could turn in like they used to be Coke bottles.
It had a tag on it.
You go in, you get some money.
Yeah.
So that would make sense that all right, I know what this is. I'm going to go in and turn it in for the reward.
He was very familiar with weather balloons. He knew what they were. He had recovered some.
Right.
But he didn't know what this was.
That adds another wrinkle to the whole thing. And so, because at this point in life, I've decided if I wasn't there seeing something that happened, I don't know what happened. I really don't. I mean, I want to believe. I'm Fox Mulder.
I'm like that. Even as a researcher, if it's not aliens, that's fine. I'll go fishing.
Right.
I don't need the frustration, the expense I've had for 30 years trying to do the research.
Right.
So I just think we haven't been told the truth.
And think we'll ever be told the truth?
No, and still aren't. To this day, it's still probably worse than it used to be.
That's the truth. What do you know about the bodies? What do you...
The nurse at the base... Let me back up. Glenn Dennis was a mortician. Mm-hmm. They had a contract with the military for ambulance service and funerals for the military guys. Mm-hmm. He got a phone call. There was an airman injured in town in a motorcycle accident. Picked him up, took him out to the base hospital. When he got out there, he said there were 2 Army ambulances parked at the rear entrance to the hospital. The back doors open. What he said was gray-looking metal in the ambulances. Took the injured airman inside. A 6'2" redheaded captain grabbed him by the shoulder, turned him around, and said, "Glenn, if you go to town and spread any rumors about the hospital, they'll find your bones out in the sand." That was another threat. Mm-hmm. So the military escorted him back to the funeral home. He got a couple of phone calls that afternoon from the military wanting to know what chemicals are involved in the embalming of bodies that were in the desert a couple of days. He said, do I need to get things ready? No, we're just checking. Later that afternoon, he got another phone call. How many hermetically sealed children's coffins do you have in stock? He said, I don't have any. I get them out of Amarillo, have them in the morning. Shall I order some? No, we're just checking. That tells me there were new people at the hospital, because the people that would have been there would have known all that stuff from the undertaker, but they didn't. So the next day, the nurse called Glenn. She said, "Come out to the officers' club. I need to talk to you." He went out there. On the back of her prescription pad, she drew a picture of an alien. She told Glenn she was taking notes for a pathologist that was examining a body. She gave him a pretty good description. 3.5 to 4 feet tall, long skinny arms and legs. Eyes were black and no pupil.
Right.
4 fingers, not 5.
Right.
So she gave a pretty good description of what they looked like. The next day, Glenn called out there to get more information and was told the nurse is no longer here. She was shipped out. He did some checking, was told she was killed in a plane crash in Europe. There is no plane crash in Europe. So I have problems with Glenn's story because he never gave us the right name for the nurse.
Right, right.
And if you don't have a name, the research stops right there. You can't go any further.
Yep.
I did run a Freedom of Information request on him to make sure he was a mortician.
Right.
He got that in San Francisco just prior to the event. So he was a mortician.
Okay.
I believe that, and I believe there was a nurse. But because he hasn't given us a name, personally, I think he had an affair with the nurse. He was married at the time.
Right.
I was with Glenn every day right here for 2.5 years, him and Walter.
Okay.
They were both founders of the museum.
Okay.
So I had a lot of conversations with him, and his story never changed. So I really think he was covering himself as well as the nurse.
Really, even after all those years, he didn't want that to get out that he was.
So he's married and had two daughters.
Right, right.
And I think for that reason, he never went public with it.
And the reason he had gone out there to see her, you think, at the base that night, and she had been the one, but you think she did tell him about what she had seen?
Yeah. I think there was a nurse.
Right. Right.
And Glenn was a mortician.
Okay.
But you can't put the two together.
Gotcha. Okay. But did he, when he described it, and you had conversations about him seeing the?
No, he didn't see anybody's.
Okay. He walked into the hospital. He saw something in the back of the cars, right?
When he walked in, the nurse came out of a side room with her face covered and nauseated. I said, "Glenn, you better get out of here before you get in trouble." So the military escorted him back to the funeral home. That afternoon, he got the phone calls.
Okay.
And then the next day, she was gone. They already shipped her out.
And you think, were they just trying to keep those two apart?
I think so, yeah.
And trying to keep her and scatter everybody who had seen anything.
It seemed like Glenn told me one time that she was put in a, what do they call the Catholic, where the nuns go.
A convent.
Yeah, he said she was in a convent, but we didn't have a name.
Yeah. Right. So
we couldn't check anything.
Right.
We had a few names that we checked on. None of them come close to being the same thing.
What is the most compelling? Have you seen any of the evidence, the physical evidence?
There is no physical evidence.
Or I guess some of the things that Frank. Sorry, I'm getting my names mixed up. Frank has found Frank Kimbler out in the desert.
Yeah.
If you've seen some of those things, do you think the
artifacts?
I'm not sure. The buttons could have been Boy Scouts or could have been some military, but I don't put a lot of confidence in it until that can be proven.
Right.
I've been out to the crash site several times. The Sci-Fi Channel did a special out there. We had the University of New Mexico Archaeological Group with us. We took something like 64 bags of material and didn't find a thing. Really? When they cleaned that up, there was at least 2 times they cleaned it up with military going shoulder to shoulder across that field.
Right.
So they got it all. Now, we think there may be something lower that we haven't got to yet because
of the impact and
right. Right.
forced under the sand.
Yeah.
And sand out there in the desert moves around a lot too
Well,
with the wind. And
77 years, it's covered up a lot.
yeah,
Cattle, sheep, dust
Yep.
storms. It's
like
no
Egypt.
no telling how far that's come up.
Have you looked into any of the cattle mutilations?
A little bit.
Those things fascinate me.
Yeah, it is. I don't think it's not alien. I think if our government wanted a cow, they go to the rancher and say, I need a cow, and they'd
Right.
get it.
What do you think it is then? If you don't think it's
I think that it's government, I think, doing research, because the way these things are dissected, there's no blood,
right,
absolute amazing cutting, and just certain organs.
yeah.
So I think they're probably doing research on that.
You don't think it's aliens though?
I don't think so.
Why are they so obvious about? Like we had some. Was it last year or the year before in Texas? They've been 2 years ago now.
Yeah, maybe.
And it was, I think 7. I want to say 7. I'm probably getting the numbers all wrong. But down this one stretch of highway in Texas, and the same story as every other story that's been told. And I think at the same time, one happened in Oklahoma the same day. But it's always the same story. Why do they leave them out? If it's the government, why do they do it in your opinion, in such a haphazard way and leave them out there and just let this mystery
To
grow?
add confusion to it.
Just to sow a little discord.
Yeah.
To what end? Just
Nobody knows who's doing them, so they just leave what they don't need. And the varmints will take care of that.
But isn't it the case though that they won't the critters out there, the fox and the coyotes won't eat? That's what I'd read is they won't go near the carcass.
I don't know that. It may be.
Right. It's such a weird aspect of this
Yeah.
whole thing, but maybe it's not tied into it at all. Who knows?
Yeah.
We could be dealing with phenomenon that are not even.
Well, it's like crop
connected.
circles.
What's your take on those?
With an engineering background, the accuracy of those things is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
The detail. I don't think a guy walked around the field with a board
Right.
in the dark
Smashing them down, yeah.
Right.
and
with his
doing
feet.
that.
I agree.
Now, I have a theory on it. Probably not worth anything.
Absolutely, it's worse.
Yeah, what's your theory?
It's done on a computer. They take it and shoot it up to a satellite. Satellite has microwave, shoots it back down, it sucks the moisture out of the plant.
Really?
We had not heard that yet, but
I've
that's
never heard that.
plausible.
That's my theory. Probably
Yeah.
not worth anything, but that's my theory.
So with a microwave, would that do that to the
Suck the moisture out.
and that would do that to the node?
And
I guess it.
Yeah.
But they, in some cases, don't they continue growing?
I haven't heard that.
Okay. Again, that's
But the
it.
detail on them things is unbelievable.
Oh, it's incredible. And there were the two guys who said that they, we did it, and
Yeah.
here's how we did. But then they couldn't replicate it for
Right.
the cameras, so they probably did do some.
Yeah.
Because we don't see all of them, of course.
We have a display back in the museum, some of the,
And the ones that are complex are super complex.
yeah.
And there's one piece of video I've seen online that shows, I don't know if they're spheres or
The
craft,
little
whatever
white
they are.
orbs.
That,
Yeah, the orbs.
If you've seen that
Yeah.
piece of video where they're flying around and that's the only piece of video
I
I've
don't
ever seen.
rule it out.
Right.
I don't know it, so I don't rule it out. That's my theory on the microwave.
I keep hoping you're going to drop a piece of magic on us right now and go, but you know what? Here, let me show you this right here. Bam. And then, see now, because I've been searching for 30 years, 35 years. First I looked into UFOs was 1990-ish for the Nashville Network, and I did a series on UFOs. And went to MUFON convention in Arkansas and talked to the people who had been investigating Billy Meyer. Mm-hmm. You familiar with that case? Who else did I talk to? A bunch of people.
Did you ever meet Stanton Friedman?
I don't think I ever did.
He was the first original civilian researcher on Roswell.
Okay.
He found J.C. Marcel.
I don't think I ever
That's
did talk
kind
to
of
him.
a funny story. He was doing a lecture at a college in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody came up to him and said, I know a guy you need to interview that was involved with a UFO crash. Stan said, who? His name's Jesse Marcel. He's a retired major. He lives in Yuma, Louisiana. At the airport, he called him, talked to him, and he said, okay, you were at Roswell. Is there any chance that anybody else is still there in Roswell? He gave him the name Walter Hout.
Mm-hmm.
He got home, he called Walter's office, or he called the newspaper. He knew he was with the newspaper. And the woman that answered the phone, he said, I'm trying to locate a Walter Hout. She said, I'm Walter's wife. What are the chances of that?
Right.
And I gave Stanton a hard time about that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But what are the chances of that happening?
Serendipity. Man, when something's supposed to happen, it happens.
Yep. And then from there on, he was top researcher. I worked with him 27 years. He passed away a couple years ago.
Right.
But I worked with him for 27 years.
Yeah, I when I started working on it, in early '90s, it was, as you remember, we had no cell phones, we didn't have computers.
Mm-hmm.
If you were traveling, you got to the hotel to see if you had the pink message slip in the thing at the front desk, and then you went up to the room and then you.
I don't know how many reports I sent to Stanton and Don Schmitt that I typed on a typewriter.
Yep.
Time consuming, but we did it.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. Damn
Yep.
it. And you got to back up.
Right.
Dun, 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 dun. Shoot, rip the paper out and start over again because
We've come a long way.
I know, right? Wouldn't it have been nice to have the equipment that we have now 30 years ago?
And I don't do the lectures for me anymore. I do them for kids. Kids need to know that something happened here. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important.
Because the people who are all firsthand associated with Roswell are, is there anybody left who's firsthand?
Not that I'm aware of. We've exhausted it.
Frankie May was around, but she died several years ago. And
now the sheriff's daughters were threatened as little girls. Don Schmitt and I got to meet them. They were both ranch women. Mm-hmm. We had them come to town and took us through the sheriff's office and told us that the sheriff's office and their living quarters were in the bottom of the building. The jail was upstairs. Mm-hmm. So I told them, I said, I'd like to go up in the jail and take some pictures. We don't go up there. I said, why? Daddy said, we have no business up there. 60 years later, they wouldn't do it.
Wow.
Talk about respect.
No kidding.
But we got to talk to both of them.
Are they still around?
No.
Oh, really?
No. They're part of the 600. I hope that we have somebody that will give a deathbed confession. But right now, I don't know of anybody.
And somewhere, I think it was again, I think it was Frank we were talking to. Somewhere there's probably that little piece of metal, whatever it is, that the magic metal sitting in a box in somebody's house or in the back of a safe or in a jewelry box.
I keep thinking that maybe it's in an attic or a basement and some kid finds it, throws it away, thinks it's junk.
Right.
We've talked about maybe if we got a piece of the metal, have it tested, we'd have to probably do that overseas. Because nearly every
they'd take it away from you.
Every college and laboratory in the country is subsidized by the government. Mm-hmm. And if they get it, we won't see it. So we'd have to do it overseas.
All right, because I'm with you. I don't trust anything or anyone anymore. But how would they? In other words, if you gave them this metal and said, "Look, just analyze this," they weren't around. Whoever this is, this person, the scientist who's going to be doing the testing, wasn't around with Roswell. Would they be? Oh, this is weird. I don't know what this is. Well, but I'm going to call Bob at the Air Force or Department of whatever. I mean, I see what you're saying, and I'm with you, and I don't trust them. But why would they do that? I mean, why would they?
Well, now you've raised the question about why is it covered up?
And why is it? Why is it covered
One
up?
word: control. Our government won't do anything they can't control, and they can't do anything about it. If they can get here, we can't go there. They're so far advanced of us technologically, I don't think there's any way we could communicate with them.
Even if they showed up and parked in front, right? They being the aliens.
I think they're that far advanced of us. Stanton said one time that human beings are in the preschool of the universe. That makes sense. I don't think we're nearly as smart as we think we are.
No, I don't either.
And I can't be egotistical enough to think we're the only thing in the universe.
I'm with you on that too. And especially this new telescope, the Vera, I
Yeah.
can't remember what it's called, but the pictures that it's so far produced and the galaxies and the stars.
I'm of the opinion we have two space programs. NASA that we know about and another one we don't know about.
Yeah, that seems about right too.
The astronauts have come forward, a few of them, and talked about it. I had a couple of long conversations with Dr. Mitchell, who's the sixth man on the moon. 285 out here going to Artesia is a Dr. Mitchell's highway.
Okay.
He was raised just south of here.
Right.
And I asked him one time, I said, what was it like to be on the moon? He said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? You were there, weren't you? Yeah, but he said, we were so busy, we didn't have time to think about it until the way back. And then I realized where we had been, and it changed his life. He was a big supporter of UFOs.
What did he tell you was the weirdest thing he'd seen?
What?
What was the weirdest thing he told you he had seen?
He didn't see anything on the moon. Now, we've had astronauts that have radioed back say we're being watched.
Right.
I had a guy on my tour that worked for NASA, and he was the guy that communicated with the astronauts from Houston or wherever. And I asked him one time, I said, I heard that there was an astronaut went around the back of the moon, and there's no contact when they get behind it. And when they came out, he said, there really is a Santa Claus. This guy turned white. He said, how do you know that? I said, through my research. He said, that's a code name, and you know what it stands for. And that's all he said.
Really?
There really is a Santa Claus.
And
That's all he would say. He wouldn't say anything else. But he was shocked that I knew anything about that.
You think there's anything on the backside of the moon?
No, not really. I don't.
You think the moon is a moon?
It was part of the Earth at one time, broke away. It's part of the plan of this whole universe. Everything has to work together. But I don't really think there's anything behind it.
The concept of the hollow moon?
No.
You don't buy into that?
No.
It's weird, though, the way we only see the one side of it.
Doesn't rotate, yeah.
I mean, if you were going to have an observation post, that'd be it.
Yeah.
And it'd be in the perfect position.
I don't know that we won't at some time use it to go further out in space, maybe.
Right.
On that side. But right now, I don't know anything back there.
Right. I would love to know. The Chinese know, because haven't they been back there now? I guess we will. We've all been back there. They're just not going to tell us.
And they're not talking.
Right. That's the whole thing. What do you know about Area 51?
I was there in 2007 at the gates. You don't go into Area 51.
Right.
There's two gates. One has a guard shack right there. The other one is behind a sand dune. And there's about a 10-mile dirt road from the mailbox back to the mountain to the site. And when I was there, I got out of the truck and I was walking along the boundary. There's no fence. There's a gate, but there's no fence. They have monitors all around that thing, can tell the difference between animal and human perspiration. So they know if it's an animal or a human.
Right.
When we got back there was a Jeep up on the hill. They had camouflage uniforms on, had binoculars watching me, and were listening to what I was saying. They had monitors where they could hear me. As long as you don't go across that border, you're all right. They won't do anything. But if you get across that border, you're in trouble. The British Broadcasting Company, BBC, was there a couple of years ago, and they were brave enough to go over the boundary to the guard shack and knocked on the door.
Right.
The guards came flying out of there with weapons, put them under gunpoint for 3 hours. Called a local sheriff. He came out. The sheriff handles it, not the military. Sheriff came out and said, I'm going to fine each one of you $600 and you're going to jail. I'll guarantee you the government will know where them people are for the rest of their life.
I hadn't heard that story. What? So when you were there, you didn't cross over the line. What did you do?
At the other entrance, there's a camera on about a 30-foot pole, and I'm walking down along the boundary. That camera's every time I stop, the camera's on me. Mm-hmm. So I just waved at him. I said, I know you're watching me. That's it. But that was as close as I got to anything.
Were you just out there testing the boundaries, or just because you wanted?
Yeah, I was just looking around, and my wife was with me. She said, "There's no insects." She said she was walking around looking at the ground. She said, "I couldn't find any insects." So probably from all the radiation out there. I know they check the rancher that lives next door. Mm-hmm. They check him and his sheep and his cattle every so often for radiation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's been a lot of radiation out there.
We went to the storming of, which was back in 2018, I think. It was a big media event. And the gate that we went to was way off the beaten path. They had just put concertina wire up. There was a guard shack over here, but there was a gate. And because they knew everybody was coming, you could go up and take pictures in front of it and all that. And it was, but it was just, it was a big party media event stunt kind of thing. I wonder.
There was 2 guys died of radiation. They were burning toxic stuff on top of the ground. Uh-huh. These guys were exposed to it. Their wives sued the government. The judge was not allowed to look at the paperwork.
Really?
Yep.
That must have made things awkward. Mm-hmm. Did they win?
I don't know if they got anything out of it or not, but they didn't talk anymore about it.
See, there's so many stories and so much legend around all of these things that and they build on each other.
Yeah.
Over the years.
Bob Lazar.
Yes. Perfect example. What do you think of him?
He claims to have a degree from MIT and Caltech. Mm-hmm. There's no record. No, they may have destroyed his records. I'll give him that.
Right.
But Stanton was a physicist, nuclear physicist. Stanton said he didn't have the knowledge to say what he was saying. And besides that, he's had a rough life with the law.
Lazar? Yeah.
He's had a brothel. He's had different types of vehicles that got him in trouble. Mm-hmm. I don't trust a guy. Unless they come out with something that I can really buy.
Right.
I'm not going. I think the government may have used him as a scapegoat.
They do that a lot.
Yeah,
they do.
Use him and then cover it up.
What about not Dennis Lear? Timothy Lear?
Good.
Timothy. I talked to Timothy Good in 1990. He just died recently, didn't he?
I think so.
Above Top Secret. He wrote that book, and he was the one. He talked about alien tech and things like microwaves.
Yeah, I read the book.
Yeah. He was a fascinating cat.
Yeah. He
really was. Microwaves. That was one of the things he said that came from alien technology. Do you think?
Well, fiber optics, we think, came from that.
Yeah.
And then Marcel talked about when he went to the house, coming back, he stopped at the house on 7th Street. Didn't go out to the base till a little later.
Right.
Brought the stuff in, put it on the kitchen table, and him and his son played with it. His son was 11 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. I've done lectures with him. He died also.
Right.
But Jesse said you could bend the stuff, crumble it. One of the engineers at the base hit it with a 10-pound sledgehammer and didn't dent it. And if you crumble it up, put it on a table, it went back to its original shape without any creases.
Right.
We call it memory material.
Yeah.
But that's some of the stuff we got. And one of the guys I had on tour from NASA said he thought that they had some of that stuff or something similar that they used with the spacecrafts.
Wouldn't that be something to be able to get a hold of a piece of that?
Yeah.
Just to hold it. I mean...
Well, we need to know what it's made of, the chemicals it's made of, and then where it's from.
Right.
That'll be the answer to Roswell.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, if it's not aliens, that's fine. I'll go fishing.
Right. Just want to know. I hope before, yes, I'm with you. I hope before, when I close my eyes for the last time, I hope that I know at least something.
I've always said if I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God why we have roaches and what happened at Roswell.
Did I not touch on anything that I should have? Anything you want to add?
No, you wore me out pretty well.
That's we could talk all day, but I know you and I don't have all day. So Dennis Balthaser, thank you. I appreciate your time and all of the effort. But just out of curiosity, what are you doing more lectures today? What's the rest of your year look like?
I did a little one yesterday and today at 11 o'clock. I had hospital problems in February, and I haven't done a lecture since February. And I came in and talked to the girls here 2 weeks ago. I said, I'm probably not going to be able to do it. I'm on oxygen sometimes.
All right.
They said, you're going to do it. And then my wife said, you're going to do it.
You're going to do it.
Which is probably good for me to have done it.
Yeah.
But I had a full house in the video room, both lectures, and a lot of good questions.
Sure.
And that's what it's about. I like them questions.
There you go. That's the important thing.
And I'm starting to get questions from young people.
Good.
That really excites me.
Yeah.
So
no kidding.
I'm going to probably stick with it until I close my eyes. But I think it's important. I really do.
I agree with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.